Welcome to another episode of Nightlife. I'm joined today by Bob and Tim. It's just a small group today, but we were in the middle of a conversation, just hanging out, and we decided to put the cameras on and kind of keep the conversation going.
Yeah, we always should have the cameras on, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of these. It's just, these are, we are active role players. We're playing in several different role-playing games. Bob's running games. I'm running games. And
I'm playing games.
Yeah. I'm trying to get in as many games as I can.
Correct. And
that my wife and kids allow me to do.
Sure. And I'm running 3 games right now.
Yeah, you're on another level.
I'm playing in 2 of them. Yeah. So is Bob.
I was like, I'm playing in 2 of them also.
So yeah, there are some crossovers. And so when we get together, we catch up about life and the kids and work, and then we start talking about role-playing games.
Yeah, we like randomly just roll right into it.
Yeah, so it's we get the cameras going. But before we get into that, I want to give a special shout out. We've got a couple new patrons this week. Real thankful, real appreciative. So we want to give a shout out to Doug Pierce, Richard Shackleton, and Jose Martinez, who've recently joined the Night Nation and have become patrons. And we're really appreciative of that and just super thrilled. And the other thing I wanted to kind of give a quick shout out for here, as we sit here, I'm going to check my phone real quick. We are at about 998 subs.
So if you're watching this in the future.
Yeah. So by the time I get this edited and put up on YouTube.
Well, they're not going to watch it in the past.
Right. We will be at 1,000 subs. So for all intents and purposes, we did it. We are YouTube.
Yeah. When do you get that cool platinum fucking YouTube button? Is that 10,000?
100,000.
Oh my. Okay. So keep subscribing.
Gold, I think. Silver, you get 100,000. Gold, you get at 1 million.
Keep subscribing. Yeah.
So
liking the videos.
For everyone who's watched our videos, thank you so very much. I know it's meaningless in terms of the greater scheme of YouTube, but 1,000 subs for us has been a milestone, and we're so thankful that everyone has appreciated us. And you guys can continue to support us through liking, subscribing, leaving comments. I try to get to all of you. As the channel's grown a little bit, it's harder to get back to everyone immediately. And if you would like a more active dialogue, I would encourage you to join our Patreon. We have a very active Discord there, and we'll be happy to discuss anything and everything with you. But certainly on YouTube, that's still that's our main audience, and we're really appreciative of all of you as well.
But with 100,000, with 1,000 subs, we do get the polls now. We get analytics stuff, and we can start doing shorts.
Correct.
Doing fun stuff.
Yeah, so we can do a lot more stuff. I think we can go live now.
Oh, dude.
So we can go live on YouTube.
It was all cool. I just wanted to get to that point.
Yeah,
so we could do more fun stuff.
Yeah, we just wanted to be able to do more fun stuff and get more community engagement and more community involvement. And that's why it's been a big you get monetized, but let's be real here. We're not making any money off of this. So
yeah. If it buys me a beer, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. So
or two.
I said I wasn't going to drink a beer. While on night.
Yeah, but we were already drinking before we started talking.
But this is to 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
So,
click.
Tim raised the subway.
Yeah.
So thank you for everybody.
No one knows whether this is pop or vodka.
Right. So what we were talking about is that we were talking about Game of Thrones, actually.
We were.
We're talking about randomness, and how I thought the idea of having a random character that you didn't really care if it died, so you would focus more on the story more instead of the character more, might be actually more fun. And Derek pointed out that why focus on the story when you should be focusing maybe on the world?
Correct.
And then he said, and to your point, I think that's a great point, is maybe you should care if he dies, but not at the same time. So it's like a twofer.
Yeah. And the reason why we brought up Game of Thrones is I said the thing that made Game of Thrones so incredible and why I think it became so popular, at least the early seasons, was that
some of us still like it.
Was that people saw something they'd never seen before. It was a cool, engaging story with really likable and relatable characters, or really, hateable villains. And you didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, you knew at the end of your day that someone was writing a script for these people, but they might have been rolling dice and figuring out what happened to them. It's like, I rolled a nat 1. I guess everybody dies. And
Red Wedding.
That excitement brought the viewers in. And what folks didn't realize is that's what D&D could be and
should be.
And Bob said, you mean should be? Because that's what Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or role-playing games in general, fantasy role-playing games are at their best, is when you're telling this super engaging story, but you're on the edge of your seat the whole time because, I want my character to live and take the throne, and maybe the DM wants my character to live and take the throne. They're a big fan of my character. And because it's a game and I'm the DM and I have complete authority of my world, I can just make that happen.
Absolutely.
But if it's not that and the dice are involved and you don't know what's going to happen, man, that adds so much more to it.
That's why you shouldn't fudge.
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't fudge.
That's right.
But it's like, I think that you saw in Game of Thrones what a D&D campaign could be. And that is...
If a D&D campaign was like that, I'd be going crazy.
And that was kind of the point, was that, yes, you had great characters that you were involved with. And they had they had great strengths and great flaws, right?
And they had good stories that you were...
And they had good stories that you were involved in. But even when those characters died and those storylines were completely wrapped up, you kept watching.
Absolutely.
Because you were drawn into the world. And the world is what persists. Yeah. And that's what draws you in. And because if all of your enjoyment in the game is built up into your character and your idea of that character, then if that deviates at all, which can happen a lot in a game with random dice rolls, then does that mean you don't enjoy the game anymore? My character dies, so I'm going to take my ball or my dice and go home? No. I mean, you should be involved with the game and the game world. And that way, no matter what happens, you should be a champion for your character. So our good buddy, who we've mentioned on the channel a couple of times, Mr. Aaron Smith, he is thinking about running a game. I don't get to play much, so this would be a unique opportunity for me. And he's thinking about running a game, and he wants to bring randomness back to the game. If you've played 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons or you've played Pathfinder 2nd edition, you know that character creation is, it's pretty by the book. You
cut and dry.
You get to pick a lot of things. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, there's really no dice rolling at all.
A lot of things.
But there's no dice rolling at all.
Correct.
Right? You don't generate...
I didn't even know you could dice roll for a while.
Yeah.
Because I just went from 5e to 2e, I guess 5e D&D. And so I just made my characters.
Exactly. So the idea that in old school, basic, or not even old school, going back to 3rd edition.
46 drop low.
Yeah, you roll 4 to 6 sided dice, you drop the lowest thing. So, and in the very earliest editions of Dungeons and Dragons, you put your ability scores in a strict order.
Yeah.
So if I rolled an 18 and I rolled it for strength, it had to be in strength. So it doesn't matter that I wanted to be a thief or a wizard. Nope, my 18 was in strength. So either I was a really, really, really strong wizard or I would probably be a fighter. And you had less control over what you got. And I don't know, that there's sort of an interest to that, right?
I did it randomly. So he was using D100s. And so I randomly did the D100 rolls. And I got a human cleric that was like a good, light person, and I would never...
Did you already roll something?
I was joking in the Discord. I was just I was like rolling with the bot.
I missed that.
I will not be counting that roll. But I was a human cleric, which I would never ever play. But after I did it, I was like, but what if I did?
Yeah,
right.
In the spirit of true randomness, why wouldn't you go with that?
I don't know. I kind of want to roll dice, not bot dice. I want to roll real dice at a table.
Okay, so you're not discounting the roll because you got something you didn't like.
No. If I roll a human cleric the next time,
Gotcha.
I would definitely play it. I just thought it was like,
understood.
If you asked me to build a character in 5e or 2e or whatever and said, you're going to build it, I would never, ever pick a human cleric.
Gotcha.
It's just not my style.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? Maybe kind of fun.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking like, but then I don't care if I die.
Right. And that's where my point was. I think randomness is great. We got some feedback on our last video, which was about role playing. And I made some comments in there about how, your character does the stupid thing and your character does the dumb thing and and everyone's like, role playing doesn't have to mean being doing stupid. And that is very true. I mean, that's I don't want to make it seem like you can role play that, my characters are very smart and they do the right thing. And like, that's totally fine. But I think part of the fun of the challenge, the reason why I focused on the negatives is because, if your character is like, my character is
good at everything.
Well, okay, that's not.
No, but I'm sort of thinking
that's not really interesting, right? Yeah. And so I think where some of the fun of role playing comes in is when you have to play something that you didn't want to play, right? If you just get to always be the exact thing, like if you really want to be a dwarf barbarian and you just make a dwarf barbarian in every game.
Exactly.
Like at a certain point,
I feel like I would role play a human cleric more than anything.
I think you miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah.
And also I think that the more, this is, going back to our last video too, I think the more your character is something that you didn't want to be or isn't like you, I think that by definition is more role playing because you're now putting yourself more into the shoes of this character. And you might even think of it when you're playing the exact character that you wanted to be, you might not even think of it as your character. You're like, this is just me. This is just a badass,
Let's talk about
sweet
me
version
being
of
frugal.
me, right?
You know,
But
I'm
if it's
frugal in
someone-
real life.
Yeah, but if it's something you're not, you're
Correct.
like, oh, this is a different person. And I don't know, what would it do?
I think that's what intrigued me. When I rolled it, I was kind of like, ugh. But I was like, you know what? I would roll with this.
Yeah.
I'd see what it did.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things about, doing things randomly is it's like such an opportunity to improvise outside of the norm, right? Because, even with Gwildor, I, still made a lot of choices, and I'm like, he is a detective. Like, okay, I'm making these choices. But, I think about Dritz Do'Urden a lot because, back when I read the books and super years ago when we were playing 3rd edition.
Dritz Do'Urden is a dark elf ranger from R.A. Salvatore, writer for Forgotten Realms, a Dark Elf trilogy, Icewind Dale, or a Crystal Shards trilogy, million other books.
Yeah, and there was this joke, or not really a joke, but it's like if you were going to build Dritz in 3rd edition, right? Like you'd have he's a fighter ranger. That's all he really does. But every once in a while, he goes into a rage. Right. And you're like, oh, well, why is that? Like, it's like, oh, well, I kind of think it was like, that was a weird random roll. And, for Dritz, it was because he spent years in the Underdark with just himself and, would lose himself in a rage to survive. But like, that's like just such a fun thing. It's like, oh, my character is this level in barbarian and sometimes goes into a rage. Like it feels like it's a randomly rolled, like someone was sitting at the table and like, I'm going to roll randomly for what class I take as my next level. Right.
It's not optimized.
Right. Not optimized at all, but it's like fun. And you make it into this role playing reason.
Yeah. And I will criticize Pathfinder 2nd edition on this. I do think that the game is so tightly balanced.
It is very
that it does not leave a lot of room for you to make suboptimal decisions. If you make a fighter character,
you actually have to make the optimal decisions, or you're at a huge disadvantage.
It's pretty rough. The math is really hold against you. Now, again, that doesn't mean you can't role play.
Correct.
But I do think that it's important, and I think this is a big difference between me and other people. I think that role playing and the mechanics of the game should not be independent. I think that if I have something in the game, like for example, if my character goes into these blood rages because he spent years as a survivor in the Underdark, that's a very cool story element. But I want to see that. The cool thing about D&D is that you can reflect that in the game. Cool, I have this rage power. I have this ability that makes me, gain bonus damage and bonus because I'm full of rage, but I can't distinguish friend from foe. Like the two sides of your character should talk to one another. So I think that having those random elements to your character that you wouldn't expect to or plan to put in can be really fun. But I think that you need to have both. I think you need to have a story reason for them, but I also think you need to have a mechanical reason for it.
So how do you, going back to the Game of Thrones thing, I think Game of Thrones was the greatest example that you could have gave for that, because it feels like a random yet I attach the character in a sense. How do you do it where I want a random character so that it's fun and random, but at the same time, I get attached to him? Is that just playing over time?
I think that comes from playing it, right? So, I think the danger...
Or is that from the story and the people at the table kind of grabbing it together?
Well, I think that the key is that if you're invested in the world... You'll be more invested in the character. So, the danger with rolling a random character is you're like, okay, I really want to be a cool elf rogue. You roll a bunch of dice and you're like, okay, I'm a halfling cleric. Well, this isn't what I wanted to be. And you just phone it in.
Yeah.
You make stupid decisions. Maybe you don't even really role play, and then you're like, there might be a pit trap. I'll check with my character. My character leaves all his equipment at the foot of the party, and then he rolls down the hallway to see if he sets off any traps, because you're like trying to die.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, that could be good for a hoot. I'm not gonna lie. That could. Well,
I randomly rolled in our OSR game a thief. Yeah, thief. I've never played a thief.
Sure.
And it was fun. I was like sneaky and stealthy and slicing people's throats behind, grabbing people's clothes and putting them on and being real mischievous. I've never done that before.
Sure.
But that was because my dice roll picked me as a thief, basically. And I was like, how can I do this? How do I do this guy right?
You need to embrace the randomness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And your character, you need to want to express and drive that character.
I like embrace the randomness. That's a pretty... You have to really feel like that's a good quote.
If
I
you're
like that.
Fighting it, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
you're
playing the wrong game system.
Yeah, you're playing. Well, I'd argue you are playing the wrong game system. I mean, a 20-sided die is a huge range of possible options.
Yeah.
And so any of these role playing games, and that's where I think they've lost they've tried to maintain randomness. They still include the D20 and they still include all these things, but it's like they've bent over backwards to create all of this math and all of these systems so that they can still give the appearance that the game is random, but then somehow really kind of eliminate all the randomness. You know, death saving throws in 5th edition are a great example of this.
Lack thereof.
Yeah, it feels like, it feels like anything could happen. My character could die. It's like, but can they though?
Can they really?
No.
Is your entire party really going to ignore you for like 4 rounds?
And so the example I gave before the camera started rolling was I was like, if again, spoilers for Game of Thrones, but I'm sorry if you've never seen the show, but I'm sure everybody pretty much knows.
Turn it off now.
But
go to a different video.
The main storyline of Game of Thrones with so many of these incredible moments and things like the Red Wedding would like never happen in a D&D game for most people. Because
but what if they did?
Because either one, the game rules would support the characters being able to avoid that. Robb Stark at the Red Wedding, would be like, I spend a hero point.
Yeah. I dodged that first crossbow bolt.
Yeah, like I fight, or my character's so high level, he just takes 8 shots to the chest and he just fights his way free and hacks everybody down, right? So either the game rules themselves don't allow that sort of thing to happen. Oh, our high level characters are basically tanks.
Right.
Or 2, more likely, the DM would conspire to fudge or cheat or just never even put the characters in that situation or put them in the situation and be like, but I'm going to make it balanced so that they can definitely get out.
Well, what you said was like, well, we got to get to this point, right? You're Robb Stark. So how are we going to get to the end where you're on the throne?
And I'll give you, exactly. Because maybe the DM has already planned it out. Oh, Robb Stark is going to come south and he's going to take over the front.
What if he dies at the Red Wedding?
And a great, but that won't happen.
I know that. And that's what's so cool.
And the other thing about it too is like, it's like, okay, this guy wants to kill Robb Stark. All right, well, Robb Stark's like a level 6 character, so a balanced encounter would be to put like 6 expert crossbowmen in the room, and that way he can fight his way free.
Right. So we're going to put 40.
So we're going to put 40.
Expert crossbowmen.
Right. And
good luck.
And the player, and myself was like, well, that's not fair. Yeah, no, obviously not.
This guy wants to assassinate you. He doesn't
probably shouldn't have came there with your new wife.
and so this is where I think D&D, this is where I think D&D games can miss the mark is by not embracing randomness, you miss the very unique storytelling opportunity that D&D gives you, which is the power of the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
The story might not go the way you wanted it to do.
Yeah, now don't get us wrong. We're not suggesting surrounding the party with 40 archers and murdering them ruthlessly.
Correct. But if the actions,
I'd play that.
But it's very clear. If the actions the players took inevitably and logically led to that situation.
He brings this woman that he impregnated when he was supposed to be hooking up or marrying this lady. Well, if I'm the king, I'm pretty pissed too.
Right.
I don't know if I Red Wedding everyone, but I definitely do something.
Correct. And I think the key is that D&D.
Let me see if I would do.
And we've talked about this before, right? Like I think D&D and Pathfinder have gotten this. I think people have gotten confused, and they're thinking about it now in terms of movies, TV shows, and novels.
Yeah, I would think so.
And I think you've said that before, Bob. But they're not. It's this and even video games. And video games have gotten pretty complicated and pretty deep. But at the end of the day, it's something has been written by the programmer.
Usually there's an end,
right? And there's some sort of end in mind. Mm-hmm. A D&D game doesn't even need it. Does Earth have an end?
Maybe.
Like does the story ever end? Like in the thousands of years of human history, empires have risen and fallen, and queens have come and gone, and like the world just keeps on going. And I think there's a lot of fun in that.
Life finds a way.
And I think people who try to fight against the randomness, it misses the mark. I think D&D not knowing what to expect as a dungeon master, as a player, and then not just
I don't know what I'm going to roll here for my hit.
Yeah.
I mean like this political event or this what we're going to do next could make or break this thing.
I cannot stress this enough. Now I understand that there may be players out there who feel this way, maybe wrongly in the sense, which is this. It may even something as simple as when I come to a game session, I legitimately do not know whether or not my character will be alive at the end of it. Right.
I mean, I assume I'm always alive.
Right. And I think most people do. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm worried about my character. Maybe they're just not really aware. They're not deep enough into the game system or the Kool-Aid, or they don't really know that their DM is pulling punches. The fact of the matter is, as I say this tonight, and thousands of people watch this video, most of them are probably playing in, role-playing games campaigns. I'm going to assume that 99% of your characters are going to make it out of your next game session.
Yeah.
Right? I'll remember none of those, but I'll remember that one that died.
And I'm not saying that like killing your characters is interesting. What I'm saying is this is the problem with randomness. It's really cool that your character could have died legitimately, whether it's because the DM's not fudging or whether it's because the math of the game allows that situation to occur. So it's very cool and very exciting and very thrilling when my character could have died and didn't. And yeah, it sucks really bad when you do die. Yeah. That I'm not gonna lie, randomness creates incredible stories and takes your character in unbelievable directions and moves the story in places you never understood. And sometimes it really shits the bed.
And it sucks.
And it sucks. And it's stupid. And it's dumb.
Stark, spoilers again, gets his fucking head chopped off.
Right. And
like, damn.
Yeah. And a lot of people go, and
no one expected that.
And a lot of people go, but that's where the DM comes in and make sure that those stupid things don't happen. But I think you have to take the good with the bad. I don't think you can have the good without the bad.
I mean, Aaron was talking about our OSR encounter where we walked over the hill and saw 10 bandits or something like that. And like, how are we going to do this? He's like, yeah, well, if it was balanced and Derek was really trying to set us up for that, he would have made it a lot more balanced, but it's a lot more fun to see what was going to happen. And, he risked it and it was crazy and it was a lot of fun and we did survive, but we did survive not because anyone was pulling punches, because we rolled really well and it was fucking crazy and it was like the skin of our teeth and you remember that, and I still remember that.
Yeah.
And Aaron remembers that, and it was crazy because of that. And you rolled everything in front of us. We had no DM screen there.
I didn't even have a DM screen.
That's what I'm saying. We literally could be like, how many bandits? This many. What's their health? Like this. And I'm like, oh shit. Like and because of that, I felt every roll. I felt every action that Aaron took. He's like, I'm going to run in there and do this. And then he failed and he kind of fell. Shit got crazy, but I felt every one of those rolls.
Yeah, right. And
it's kind of like, to me, like, it's
awesome.
Almost the spirit of competition, because like we're not competing. We're all working together to have a fun time, right? We're not competing with anyone at the table, but when you're competing, there's that chance of not winning.
Yeah.
Right. And if there's not, well, then you're not competing.
It's
if you're always going to win.
Victory.
So there's nothing to light that fire in you. And that's the same way that, to me, like, like I said in the fudging video, fudging sucks. Like, you're pulling your punches, that's like, why? Then now there's, like Derek said, 99% of all characters in your session this week are going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And we all know it. It's the math.
Right. I mean, we can pretend that doesn't exist, but
right. But
again,
I love it when it's real and visceral.
And I cannot express this enough, which is that it is, it's going to suck sometimes. I mean, Tim and I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and if you've not played Magic the Gathering, it's a trading card game. You draw cards and you play them, and sometimes you get bad games, right? Because it's random. So sometimes you end up with cards that don't do anything, or you end up with too much land or too few land. You really can't even play a spell, and the game ends in real disappointment. And I think you have to give those up.
Yep.
And I think that game systems have tried to move away from that.
They want you to win.
Well, they want to reduce variance, right?
Hearthstone is a great example of the card game world.
So I'm a data scientist by trade, and traditional D&D games had a lot of variance, which means that a session might, on average, be, let's say, a 7 out of 10 in terms of quality. It's great. It's really fun. And some sessions were like 10s. But some sessions were like 1s and 2s, right? They were bad. And in order to get those 10s and get those 9s, you have to risk having the 1 and 2. And it can't be a pretend risk.
So we were talking almost exactly about this.
It has to be a real 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
But what I think game systems have realized
we'll just go a little lower.
What they realize is that when people quit a role-playing game and they say, I'm not going to play this role-playing game, I'm not going to buy their products anymore, it's not because their fun level wasn't a 7 or a 6.
It was the floor.
It's because they had that one session that was a 1 or a 2. And they said, never again. The system sucks.
Yep.
And so game systems realized if we could just eliminate those worst sessions, even if it means that the average fun is now only a 5 instead of a 7, and we give up the ability for that 9 or that 10. So now, whereas an old session of D&D might have been an average fun of 7, and you ranged from, let's say, a 1 to a 10, now maybe the average is 5, but it ranges from 3 to 7.
I feel like that's 100% accurate. I feel like that's a really good comparison.
And a lot of the mechanics in modern role-playing games are designed to do just that, which is eliminate variance in sometimes a very subtle way, and kind of you lose the lows, but you lose the highs. And I think overall, it can create a very different play experience. I don't want to say worse. Some people may really, really like that. But I think that I'll say that. How about that? The unique storytelling ability of role-playing games, which is an unforeseen and uncontrolled outcome, which the players and the DM have to adapt to on the fly and make sense of and roll with the punches and go in directions that no one expected. That is unique to role-playing games. And I think that elements within modern role-playing games, by reducing randomness, have taken that element out.
Yeah. And back to Game of Thrones, I think, like you said, that's why people liked it, because you did not know, unless you read the books. But even reading the books, then you didn't know.
I mean, if you read the books, it just means that the books was the surprising part.
Trust
me.
Right.
Trust me, I read the books before I saw the show, and I was just as surprised.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're reading the books like, what? Oh, he rolled a 1 there? Like, oh, he died? Like, I wasn't planning on that. And now the story has a totally different thought that I thought of when I first started reading this book. Like you said, and Derek said this too, season 1 was about Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. And by the season 2, no, it's no longer about them anymore, because the world itself evolved. So the randomness, the book itself, you could say, embrace the randomness, or your D&D session or Pathfinder session embraced the randomness, and then the world itself developed and evolved into something better or greater, and you all had that amazing memory of the first season, and that's what made the second season so good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yes, your character may have died, but now you are more involved and invested, not in the character, but in the world and in the involving story that you've been a part of. And that's the beauty of D&D. If you lose your character, you don't have to go home. You get to make a new one.
Yeah.
Hey, just crack open a beer, guys. Jeez.
And they exist in the same world that your last heroic character existed.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds crazy, I know, but back in the 70s and the 80s, campaigns used to run for decades.
I mean, some people still talk about their games lasting 10, 20 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're trying to tell a story, that's not going to be the case.
Or run an AP.
Right.
Or run an AP, because
you have an end.
Yeah, the end ends, and then that's it. The story ends. And you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? A rising action and a falling action with a climax in the middle.
Which are fine if that's what you know you're getting into.
I do think they're fine. The point of this video is not that those aren't fun activities. I think they are fun. I'm having a lot of fun playing Rise of the Rune Lords. It's really exciting to see your characters and the choices you've made and the mechanical feat choices that you've made deal with the challenges of the system. There's a certain amount of game mastery and gravitas that goes into that. But I do think that, so it's not that those aren't fun. I think that it's just missing what is very unique.
Well, it's like you said, it misses hitting that 10, or could hit that 10. Like, we are all having fun. So we're at 5, 6, 7. We're all having fun.
Yeah.
But we're never going to hit a 1, on the low end.
Correct.
We're never going to hit that 1. But if we played something really random, we might have a 10 or we might have a 1, but we never know.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, and I think we've said this in past videos before, I kind of equate role-playing games to gambling, right? There's no real skill in gambling. You're not doing anything.
Right.
But you've got something on the line. And you're rolling the dice, you're spinning the wheel, you're drawing a card from the
Unless
deck.
you're card counting.
Okay. And you want to see what happens next. And you're like, anything could happen. And that's exciting. There's a reason why casinos are so popular. But Dungeons and Dragons takes that concept and applies it to storytelling. Anything could happen. I could bust. I could hit 21. I could play out a very tight, tense hand that ends up with me just eking out a victory and gaining a little bit of money. Or I could win it all by going all in. Anything could happen. And when anything can happen, boy, that's really exciting.
I just think of a book that, like, you opened up and, like, the first page is written and, like, the pages are all blank.
Sure.
And it's like, well, and because I tell stories to my daughter every night, and we don't read books. We just tell stories to each other. So wherever she decides, I almost do this to her. Like, what do you want to do today? What do you want to do? And then she does it. Then I just develop the story that way.
Yeah.
So it's my practice for
Now,
GMing.
This is also right. One of the big things that I really like to focus on as a game master is understanding that there is a difference between theory and practice, right? People talk about where the rubber meets the road. I like to talk about where the dice hit the table,
Ooh.
right? Which is there are fine concepts, and then there's the reality of the fact that we're playing this game at a table with people, and the downside of randomness is you can't plan for that, right? Which means it's harder to prep for, and you can't plan out 3 sessions. You're like, okay, you know what? I've got a light week, works pretty easy, kids' schedule's pretty light. I'm gonna map out the next 3 adventures for the party. I'm gonna get in a bunch of monster statistics,
It'll be easy.
looking it all up, right? And then you can't do all that and then go to the next session, and then the party randomly rolls double nat 20, kills the villain right off the bat, and everybody all of a sudden all that prep work is useless. That's tough. That's a real concern. I certainly respect that. One of the reasons I like APs is because you don't have to do as much work. Game mastering is a hard job, okay? And I don't care if you are a forever DM and you love DMing. I love DMing. But at the end of a session, man, you're drained. So randomness, in some ways, both increases and decreases the work. Because on one hand, you can't come with a million things planned, so you don't have to do as much. Just let the dice fall where they may and see where it goes. On the other hand, that can quickly turn into a very boring session, where it's just a bunch of random die rolling from random tables in a random play, and then like nothing feels like it makes sense, and everything seems jumbled, and it can be kind of messy,
That's true. That's true.
There are downsides.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, like about I don't care if I die.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a downside. You should care. So I'm excited to play Aaron's campaign eventually, and I think people should embrace stuff like that more often. And I don't know. I think it's kind of fun and interesting. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah. I mean, the game is rooted in randomness. And while the random elements of the game have been stripped away from like random ability score generation and all that other stuff, I mean, you used to even randomly roll for your height and weight.
Mm-hmm.
George was still doing that.
Yeah. Using an old system.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
But nowadays, there is more of a focus on building the character that you want to build. And that is fine, but I think it can create an echo chamber type experience where you as a player never are forced to grow because you get to play the exact character that you want to play every time. And the rules of the game, because they de-stress randomness, you pretty much know how your character's going to end up. You're not going to lose your hand permanently like Jaime Lannister. You're not, wait, I'm a 2-weapon wielding fighter.
Not anymore.
I spent 7 feats on dual wield attack. Okay, well, yeah, but you don't have a hand anymore.
That would be wild if you did that in a D&D or Pathfinder game.
Right.
But it's kind of funny.
The shit out of that game.
Because in a way, PF2 supports that because then you'd be like, well, I guess I have to retrain all my shit.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now I'm an amazing duelist somehow with my offhand, but hey.
Well, and
And Game of Thrones decided that he was going to be awful.
That's right.
well, because I mean, in the older games, you didn't have retraining.
That's
Like,
right.
listen,
He was just awful.
something bad happened to you, deal with it.
Yeah. And that's what
wild.
he did. He got a immobile metal hand.
Right. So, again, randomness is at the heart of these games. I know that there are role-playing games that are not random. They do exist. Everway is one of them, which was a game from the 90s. The Saga system from TSR for Dragonlance was pretty non-random in a sense. So there are non-random elements. And there are definitely tons of mechanics to control randomness. Things like inspiration or hero points from Pathfinder 2nd Edition help you mitigate some of that randomness. But you can't eliminate it completely. And so it's like you either embrace it or you just get rid of it. I think half measures are kind of the worst of it.
Agreed. Commit one way or another.
Yeah, just commit one way or the other.
Don't half-ass some terrible solution.
Correct.
Game mechanics are not something to compromise on.
Right.
Not really.
And this is a great example if you've watched any of our actual plays. In my Pathfinder game, the way hero points work is it's not like inspiration from 5th edition or hero points from Pathfinder, where you basically you get a reroll. And so the idea is like, oh, okay, I rolled a d20, I missed, but this is really important to my character. I don't want randomness to be a factor at play here. So I'm going to spend a hero point, or I'm going to spend inspiration beforehand, I suppose, to roll twice to make sure I can get. But that's still random, right? Like you could spend inspiration and still miss.
I've rolled double 5s before,
Right.
you know?
I actually argue that this is a whole separate conversation, but I actually argue that makes you feel worse than if you
Agreed.
hadn't spent anything at all.
Yes.
I would agree.
So that's why in my Pathfinder,
Failing after investing resources is the worst.
right? Because you're like, this resource exists for me to mitigate randomness.
Yeah. Failing, period, missing, all that shit is kind of fucking terrible. But that's another discussion. But anyway, inspiration, heroic points.
So in my game, hero points basically just let you turn a failure into a success.
hero points are heroic.
Well, it because I'm running a game which is AP based, which is story based, which is a story that we know that we want to tell, and I've committed to that. That's the difference. Like I said, if you've watched our prior video, you know that I am pro sandbox. I prefer sandbox styles of play to adventure path. But if I'm going to play an adventure path, by God, let's play the adventure path. And I want to give my PCs the ability to say, no, this is an important story moment for my character, and this is a moment where they would succeed. And so instead of sort of just trying to like, I don't know, take this half-ass measure where you're like, well, you failed, but you can spend a hero point and re-roll the D20. And then it's like, okay, yeah, but what if they fail again?
Yeah.
Then you're in the same situation as before, but the player feels worse about it because they committed to that this is an important moment, spent one of their precious resources, and still failed. They're like, well, I guess I would have felt better if I just not spent anything.
Yeah, so that's an argument against the randomness, right? That's an argument against, or argument for.
Well, I'm saying
pushing it.
I would rather have a hero point like mine where it basically says, if this is a moment where you want to succeed, you can.
Yep.
And say, look, why are we messing around with this? The whole point of this is to say randomness is not important.
Right.
So let's get rid of it entirely. I'm not rolling you. There's no re-roll. You just do it.
Right.
Or you don't have anything like that at all. No hero points, no re-rolls. You just, the dice fall where they may. Just one or the other. Because
You're right. Why is it half?
Why is it half measure?
Yeah.
I don't like that. Because
I didn't think about it like that.
because if I'm going to spend a hero point to re-roll because this is an important moment for my character,
And then you roll another 5.
You roll another 5. You're like,
That's not important.
Yeah, like-
You just kind of wasted it.
yeah, and you actually feel worse than if you had just failed.
But like you said, a wasted resource. I mean, it's, you invested.
That's why you feel worse. Like,
Right.
Like not only did my character fail the important story event that I wanted them to have.
Right. You still failed.
Right. You still failed at your moment. Right. But now it's like, now I also don't have my resource to use later.
Yeah.
Like
every time I've used a heroic point or hero point, I mean, it was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I felt
You
amazing.
Felt, no, you know what you felt? Powerful.
Right.
You felt in control.
Right. Now imagine if instead of like missing and automatically hitting, you were like, okay, just reroll.
Yeah.
And you were like, cool, I rolled lower.
Yeah.
Great.
And that's that. I mean, I like the idea of randomness, but that, you're right, is.
Well, and fifth edition
feels worse.
Fifth edition kind of has an opposite problem, which is right. You have to spend inspiration. You get to roll 2d20, so you don't have that re-roll problem. But you have to spend inspiration before the roll.
That's weird.
So you're like, because I mean,
But I like the advantage disadvantage system.
Every player, hope springs eternal. You might be inspired, and you know that it's a precious resource. And you're like, okay, this is a pretty important roll. I've got a really good bonus. You maybe do the math. You're like, yeah, I only need a 6 to hit this guy. So I'm not going to spend my inspiration. And then you roll and you roll 3. And now you're like, damn it, I should have spent my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the rules of 5th edition, you have to spend it beforehand, and then you roll the 2d20.
Yep.
And maybe it's not as bad of an effect, but like if you're like, no, this is an important roll, I do need to spend it. I'm going to spend my inspiration, and now I get to roll 2d20. And let's say they both hit, you're kind of like, I kind of wish I hadn't spent the inspiration.
Yeah, that's
right. And so my point is why are we messing around with this? Like, just either embrace randomness or come up with systems that allow you to say, this is a moment where randomness doesn't matter. For all the DMs out there in our comments who are saying, I like to fudge, I think fudging is important, well, then let your players fudge.
Oh,
there you go.
That's a good point.
If you decide it's important for your story that this monster misses or hits,
hot take.
Why can't your players do the same?
Hot take.
Don't you? You trust them. They're your friends.
They're supposed to have agency in the story as well.
They're supposed to have agency in the story as well. So let them fudge. When they think, you know what, this isn't a moment where my character would have failed. I think my character succeeded. So even though I rolled a 3, my players have screens now, and they're going to roll their dice. They're going to roll their dice behind the screen and then go, oh, looks like I crit.
Yeah,
That's kind of funny.
Weird. I did buy a scroll of Raised Dead today.
And here's the thing: if that sounds silly and ridiculous to you, it is. But that is where in our Pathfinder game, I'm using hero points as it's basically like the hero can fudge because they can turn a failure into a success. They can turn a success into a critical success, but it's limited. You know, they can only do it so many times because they're limited by how many hero points they have. So yes, I don't want them to be able to do it all the time and give them complete carte blanche.
I mean, I wasted 3 or 4. I only have 1 hero point right now.
Right.
Quildor's only ever had 1 hero point, and he spent it in the first session.
Yeah. And that's because you,
that moment that I used 3, I think, hero points was the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
For Azius to be heroic.
And the other
he
thing
brought
is,
it.
And I will say this, the other thing that having a strong hero point mechanic like that does by eliminating randomness is if later you get screwed over by randomness and there's a fight, an important fight, and you go several rounds and you can't roll above a 4 and then maybe your character dies. In a sense, you kind of know that was your fault because you did have the resources to mitigate that. You just chose to spend them all at that moment.
Yep.
Right. And so that way, it's almost like you can more safely allow, in fact, by giving your players very powerful hero points, like I have in our Pathfinder 2 AP, I don't worry about the randomness. I don't have to fudge because if I throw something at them and the dice are horrific and I'm rolling nothing but 18s and 19s and they're only rolling 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, okay, well, they can use their hero points and say,
there's the system
that I hit.
Yep.
Or they can say, oh, that person crit me. No, they didn't. It was just a regular hit. And it allows them to control and mitigate that randomness. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, I suppose.
Yeah, I actually think it's a great system.
So
Agreed.
Now I only use that system because we are playing an adventure path and I want the story to be something that we, kind of.
Would you use it if we were playing Sandbox?
No.
Interesting.
No.
You just fucking kill us.
Well, yeah, we just
Maybe.
because it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Maybe we totally shit on whatever thing Derek put behind that door.
I'm sitting here rolling nothing but 1s behind the screen, and my monster can't hit you once, and it dies on round 2 without doing anything. Okay, that's cool.
Love it.
Yeah. Just embrace the chaos. But that's because in a game where I want to embrace the chaos, in my adventure path, I do not want to embrace the chaos.
Right.
I'm using the adventure path because it provides a very familiar touchstone for the players and for our viewers. And it provides me as the dungeon master or the game master, rather, it does a lot of the heavy lifting for me in terms of the plots and stories and the outlines. If I just allow nonsense and craziness to happen, it is very likely that we would very quickly be so far off of that adventure that the value of that adventure would become very limited to me because, you wouldn't be where you were supposed to be.
Makes sense.
And so it's like, okay, I want to keep y'all on the path. Okay. Not rails, but a path.
A road.
Just
the road.
Just
no
the road.
rails.
Right. No guardrails, but a road.
Yeah.
And a high suggestion.
Yes.
But I've given you guys this sort of break in case of emergency, which are sort of these hero points so that you can control that randomness. But I think in a perfect world, in the game that I would, that I 100% would prefer to play, but doesn't mean I don't enjoy the other one. No hero, no reroll, no reroll mechanics at all. I would even, Pathfinder 2nd Edition has the base hero point in the game. I would get rid of that entirely.
Wow.
I don't think it needs to be there. What's so bad about your character dying and failing?
Exactly.
I would think people would think they were not having fun.
I'm sure that is what the game system designers felt too when they made all these rules.
I know. That's what I think.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. The best hit fantasy series of all time was Game of Thrones, and everybody died. And Lord of the Rings, Gandalf dies, Boromir dies. Like heroes die left and right. That's part of this.
Well,
deal.
and that's when you're talking about the Game of Thrones thing, and I didn't really bring the two together, but you were talking about what if. Well, as he was writing it, George R. Martin was rolling dice. I mean, he really could have been. He probably didn't, but he literally put himself in those positions. He might have been, but
he might have been like, he could have been two-facing it and just plot outline. He's like, all right, I know this should happen. Does Ned escape or not of his execution? Nope.
Yeah. And so now,
Now that's what I
and
write.
if he did, how do I figure out how he did?
Right.
And I thought, wow, what if that was the D&D game? Like, how cool would that be to be living in that world and that story if you're Arya?
Yeah.
And
Well,
you just saw your father die.
right. And, part of the
and
reason.
that was Tim.
Yeah. Part of the reason that I could totally see that being the process is, at Gen Con one time I met Brandon Sanderson, who's he finished the Wheel of Time series.
He's a fantasy novelist.
He's a fantasy novelist.
Well published.
Yeah, he's pretty big, and I could totally see it happening. Where 'cause he described me. I asked him how he comes up, with some of his plot lines, and he's like, "Well, I think about an event that I know is going to happen, a big event, and what character that centers around, and then I go backwards from there. What would have to happen to that character to make this significant event happen?" So I'm like, I could totally imagine George R.R. Martin sitting there, and he's like, "Okay, Ned gets captured and might be executed. That's my big event. What happens? Oh, he is going to get killed. All right. How did we get to that point?"
Well, and I think that's the fun.
That's the fun.
That's the fun of randomness, is because at the table, when something absurd happens, it might not even make sense. But then the fun is, as a group, I talked about this with our role-playing video. If you don't know how your character should act, maybe ask the other players at the table. Guys, what do you think Azius would do in this situation? You know him pretty well. Well, same thing is true. We were I rolled randomly, years ago, we were playing Keep on the Borderlands. We were doing another OSR BX basic first edition shout out. And we were playing, and very famously, K's of Chaos, module B2, Keep on the Borderlands. The party went in and they encountered the infamous ogre, who's the super boss monster of the caves, very powerful monster for a bunch of level 1 players. But in that edition of the game, when you encountered a monster, you rolled 2 6-sided dice to determine the monster's reaction. I rolled double 6s, which meant the monster was friendly.
Oh my gosh.
Now, the dice have told me what is going to happen, but they don't tell me why. And I think the mistake is taking randomness and just going, the ogre's friendly. Well, okay, but there's an opportunity there to tell something crazy.
Why would this ogre be friendly?
And the answer we came up with was that the ogre was enemies with the goblins, who had been stealing from him and pestering him, and there were too many goblins for him to take out by himself. And so the ogre was not necessarily their ally, but he was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And he's like, "You're here to smash the goblins? Me too. Let's work together and we'll clear out these rural runs for good." And so, they rolled in with the ogre and they ruffle stomped the goblins out of the cave. And it was an incredibly amazing experience. And instead of this big epic fight, probably to their death, against this ogre, he joined their side.
That's wild.
And it was this awesome, cool, crazy moment, Now, there was another time we ran this game, because again, I've run this several times for different groups, and Tim happened to be there.
Yes.
And Tim was playing an assassin. He had rolled high enough. He played an assassin, which in first edition was a class, and had a percentile chance, if you snuck up on a monster, just kill it instantly. And this time when they encountered the ogre, Tim snuck up on it and just killed it instantly.
It is my single favorite D&D session of all time, because the number of rogues that I've played and just been oh man, I want to be an assassin. And then looking at the 3rd edition 3.5 assassin rules, and it's oh cool, I can sit around for 4 rounds and then have a chance to kill something. All right, yeah, fine, okay, sneak attacks, whatever, I'm damaged. No, I was a fucking assassin, and I literally made one roll and just murdered that dude.
Now, does the fact that you only had a 30% chance of success?
Oh my God, yes, because I shouldn't have been able to do that, that's why it was so cool.
Right? Does that make that moment worse or better?
Better,
right?
So much better,
right?
Because it's all right, I go in, I'm probably gonna die, but if I fucking don't, I'm gonna get bonus XP and bonus treasure for killing it because it's higher level and I did it solo and all that other bullshit.
And in real life, you would never gamble your life away on a 30% chance.
Right.
I hate those real life ogres.
Right.
But am I gonna do it in D&D?
But in D&D?
Hell yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
Live boldly,
and to be clear, I would do that with characters that were not part of a one shot. That's just my mentality. Live hard on my D&D characters.
Well, and I've said this, I don't know if I've said this on camera, but one of the best advice I ever got, I want to say I got it from a seminar hosted by Tracy Hickman, who is the co-creator of Dragonlance. And he said in a seminar at Gen Con, play all of your characters like you're driving a stolen car. You know, like drive it fast, drive it hard, drive it into the ground. You know,
That's right.
Like it's
No regrets.
No regret. It's a stolen car. You know.
Yeah.
You know, like if you've ever rented a car, you know, when you're traveling, you always know you treat that car a little worse than you
go a
treat
little
your
faster than you
You
should.
slam those brakes a little harder than you should, right? Because it's not yours. And that's the same thing with D&D. It's a stolen car, you know? If you crash it, you know, it's like Grand Theft Auto. Steal the car, drive it like a maniac. You crash into a light pole, get out and steal another one.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
It's a
you
thing-
died, you'll respawn at the hospital. Let's go.
Right. It's D&D. Oh, my character died. I lived like a crazy person. I did these incredible, amazing things, and he was running really hot until he died. And now I'm making a new character, and she's awesome too.
Or
and we'll just rinse and repeat.
Do you want to spend 40 hours a week in an office in D&D too? Like, those are your options.
Yeah, don't.
That's a good
Live
point.
hard or play Second Life.
Yeah. Don't let your D&D characters, game feel like you're just another day at the office.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
You know,
Very true.
Take big risks.
Do shit you would never do.
Yeah. And it becomes more exciting when you truly know that the outcome is not guaranteed, that randomness is going to influence. Now, what makes it fun, what makes it a game, is that your character can do things to influence their chance of success.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a crazy moment and the DM says, okay, you know, that's cool, but you only have a 20% chance of success. And then you think about it and you work with your players and your fellow player characters, and maybe you come up with a good idea. Maybe you use a spell or a magical item. And then the DM says, those are all really good ideas. You now have a 50% chance of success. You're like, awesome.
Yes, for sure.
We've turned this pretty unlikely thing into a coin flip. Okay, we're going to go ahead with that. Because one of the key things about D&D and embracing randomness is don't hide the percentage chance of something from your players, because you're robbing them of the sweat. The sweat is what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Right?
It's that gamble.
It's the gamble, right? In a gamble, I mean, assuming you can do simple math, you know what your odds are. You know what you're wagering.
The risk reward.
You know what you're risking. You know what you're wagering. You know, a lot of D&D games, you know what you're wagering. You know what you have to gain, but you don't necessarily know what is the actual risk, or vice versa. I've seen this a lot of times in D&D games where a DM will ask a player to make a check and they'll say, oh, I don't know. What'll happen if I do? And the DM will go, you'll find out. That's horrible. Let them know what's at stake. Tell them, if you fail, this will happen. If you succeed, this will happen.
Because now you are giving the player agency.
You're giving them agency, right? Just because it's random doesn't mean that they're not making a decision. The decision is, do I roll the dice? Or do I try to come up with a better plan or a different plan? Or do I just chicken out entirely and back away because I don't have any good ideas?
Yeah.
And that's cool, because then when you roll the dice, if you've given your players true information and true agency, and you tell them, if you tempt this action and you try to assassinate the ogre, there's a 30% chance of success. And if you succeed, the ogre will be dead. Its cave full of gold and valuables will be yours, and your character will probably gain enough experience points to immediately level. But if you fail, which there is a 70% chance of, you will not kill the ogre, and it is almost assuredly going to smash you to death. At that point, whether the player fails or succeeds, that's decided by a random die roll, but the outcome, in a sense, is yours.
Yep.
You've made a choice.
You've made the choice
And
to
if
allow
you-
the dice
and
to
if you
random.
die, that was kind of your fault.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can't be mad about that.
No, you was
because
you
Right.
had the choice to at least
Right.
live or die.
Right,
Now,
exactly.
when the percentages are the inverse, you're pissed. It's like, oh, I had a 80% chance to kill that ogre.
Yeah. Well, now you're just being petty.
Yeah, right. But I failed.
Right. And that's kind of, by the way, where modern games have gone.
Yes,
Flip it around.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They say, they go, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a game system where the PCs are 90% likely to succeed. And that means there's only a 10% chance that they'll fail, which ironically means that they'll be more upset when they fail because it's such a black swan event.
That's
Right.
interesting.
Right. When you go to, if you go to a casino and you play blackjack, you know, you probably expect to win about as much as you lose, right? So when you lose, yeah, it's a bad beat, but you're not like, this should have never happened. I mean, of course it's going to happen, right? It's gambling. But if you tell somebody, listen, I've got a bet for you. it's $1 million, but it's 99% likely to pay out. You're like, oh, okay. But in your mind, you're just like, well, I can't possibly lose. And so when you do, it's actually way worse.
Yeah.
And so what games have happened is they've taken the failure window from 50-50. And now they've made it so that the players succeed 80 or 90% of the time. So now you fail very infrequently percent of the time, which ironically makes it so that players, when they do fail, it's like worse because they never thought they were going to fail. So now the games have included mechanics to make that failure chance even less likely, because now you need to fail 3 death saving throws. Now you have a hero pointer. Now you have inspiration. And basically you've created a system where you can't fail. And then sprinkle on top a bunch of DM fudging. And now the dice rolls don't matter. Yay.
Yeah. Embrace the randomness, everybody.
Yeah. So embrace the randomness. That's the fun.
Be random.
That's the final word from Knights of Last Call is embrace the randomness. So
Hug it tight.
Hug it tight. So thanks everybody for joining us on this conversation. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments below. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more nightlife and more conversations from real role players talking about real role-playing problems. Check out our AP if you're interested in Pathfinder 2nd Edition or in the Rise of the Rune Lord campaign. The production quality has gotten pretty good over the last year, and we're pretty proud of that as well. Thanks again to everyone who's subscribed or viewed our videos. 1,000 subs means everything. And to all our patrons, which I'll run down here.
Yep.
Thank you so very much. We've had some really great conversations with everyone in the Discord. I'm really excited to hear about your campaigns and your Pathfinder 2 experiences, as well as some of your role-playing game questions, which you can leave in our Discord. All right. Well, for the Knights of Last Call, my name is Derek Melinda saying thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.